Good evening. I'm Dinah Davenport. And on tonight's episode of Almost Famous-ish, we'll be discussing the repercussions of never growing up. We'll be talking about a funk duo who was so immature that it cost one of them their lives, and how the death was so vicious that music performances would never be the same. Yes, it would. Let's not be dramatic here. Music performances have never changed. Nothing about it, nothing. But let's sit back and see what happens when rock and roll, funk, and wild behavior takes its toll. Thank you and enjoy.
Warning, everything you are about to see is fictional. The people are fake, the events are fake, the interviews are fake, the music is fake, the outrage is fake, the documentaries about the fake events would also be fake. If you finish this video and immediately begin researching whether any of it really happened, please remember that we are currently taking time out of our day to tell you that it did not. Enjoy.
Sometimes you gotta get funky!
N Rory! Ow! Somebody help that woman! Lord have mercy!
They were wild, loud, and talented as hell. Long before the lawsuits, before the controversies, before the reckless pranks, before the death, there were simply two boys nobody could control. And those two boys would grow into men, wild stars, who also could not be controlled. And it's because of this lack of control that one of the most devastating deaths in music history would occur in front of thousands of concertgoers, and music would never be the same. This is the story of N Rory. Rockwell Rock Rollins was born June 11th, 1954 in Dayton, Ohio. And Elroy Rory Jackson was born September 3rd, 1954, less than 10 miles away. The two met in elementary school, and according to virtually everyone who knew them, they were a problem immediately. Teachers complained, neighbors complained, parents and church members complained, all saying that these boys were a menace. One former classmate later recalled, if you saw one of them running, the other one was already in trouble. The boys became inseparable. They pulled pranks constantly. Not clever pranks, not sophisticated pranks, stupid pranks. The kind that usually ended with someone crying, yelling, or calling a parent. By middle school, they were filling lockers with live frogs. By high school, they were attaching firecrackers to bicycles. One principal reportedly suspended both boys after they released several chickens into a school assembly and then blamed spiritual forces. Neither ever showed much interest in academics. But with music was different. They were in love with music, and it seemed to be the only thing that ever grounded them, even if for a little while. Rock became obsessed with guitar. Rory, who had a strong, raspy voice, became obsessed with singing, and those who had great showmanship. Together, they idolized hard rock bands, psychedelic funk groups, garage rock acts, and the emerging wave of outrageous stage performers who treated concerts like theatrical events. Artists like Screamin' Jay Hawkins, Jimi Hendrix, James Brown, and Rolling Stones were a huge influence. The pair spent most of their teenage years combining those influences into something strange. Heavy guitars, dirty funk grooves, juvenile humor, and absolutely no self-control, ultimately forming what would become their funk rock duo, N Rory. And they set out to get their music career going. But one thing that never changed was their humor and behavior. Friends often joked that and Rory behaved less like musicians and more like two children who had somehow acquired amplifiers. By 1975, the pair relocated relocated to Detroit and began performing throughout the Midwest club circuit. Their shows quickly became notorious, not because they were particularly famous, but because nobody knew what they might do. They'd become infamous more for their wild stunts and practical jokes on stage than their music. One night they performed with garbage can lids attached to their knees and did the funky chicken to bang them together, all just to throw the drummer off. Another night they covered the stage with hundreds of balloons and refused to continue to perform until every single one had been popped. Audience members loved it. Club owners generally did not. The band eventually caught the attention of producer Leon Lucky Mercer. Mercer later admitted he had no idea whether the group would become stars. But he knew one thing. They grabbed people's attention and people remembered them. In 1976, Mercer signed the pair to Thunderfunk Records. The result was their debut album, Jungle Fever Dream. The record was loud, dirty, wildly inappropriate, and surprisingly successful underground. Songs about parties, women, bad decisions, and situations that probably required legal representation began building the group a cult following. A year later, they followed it with Animal Behavior. The album performed even better. By this point, the band had fully embraced their jungle-themed image. Tarzan-inspired outfits, fake vines, animal noises, primitive drum breakdowns, and increasingly ridiculous stage props. The music industry had never quite seen anything like them. Unfortunately, success only encouraged them. And N Rory had never once confused encouragement with restraint. By the late 1970s, N Rory had become one of the most unpredictable live acts in America. Not necessarily the biggest, not necessarily the most talented, but certainly the most exhausting. For audiences, that unpredictability was exciting. For managers, promoters, and record executives, it was a nightmare. Success only seemed to make the duo more immature. According to former staff members, N Rory treated virtually every situation as an opportunity for a prank. Nobody was safe. Not roadies, journalists, executives, security guards, backup musicians, or even each other. One Thunderfunk Records employee claimed he spent nearly 6 months receiving anonymous letters threatening to replace him with a chimpanzee. The letters were eventually traced back to Rory, who was sitting next to him the entire time. Another executive reportedly opened a briefcase during a contract meeting only to discover it had been filled with live crickets. Rock later admitted responsibility. His only explanation was, "I was curious." As their popularity increased, so did the scale of the pranks. Soon the audience became part of the joke. During one concert, fans, expecting a dramatic entrance, instead watched the band remain hidden backstage for nearly 20 minutes while recordings of jungle animals played over the speakers. At another show, the group emerged carrying water hoses and proceeded to soak the first 10 rows. Audience members initially thought a pipe had burst. N Rory thought it was hilarious. The crowd mostly agreed for a while. By 1978, the duo's concerts had become less like musical performances and more like large-scale public experiments. Nobody knew what would happen, sometimes not even the band. Meanwhile, the music kept getting bigger. Their third album, Savage Paradise, became their first major commercial success. The record pushed the group beyond the underground scene and onto national radio. Suddenly, N Rory were appearing on magazine covers, late-night television, music festivals, and major concert tours. But fame failed to change them. If anything, it made them worse. One television producer later claimed the duo spent an entire interview secretly replacing cue cards behind the host's back. The resulting broadcast was nearly incomprehensible. Rock called it our best television appearance. Then came 1980, and with it, their biggest album, Brain Freeze.
She couldn't let go, couldn't let go. Brain freeze.
the record exploded. A song about a night of fellatio gone wrong, built around infectious funk grooves, raunchy humor, and enough double entendres to make radio stations nervous. Brain Freeze became the biggest hit of their career. Parents hated it. Teenagers who snuck around listening to it loved it. Church groups were horrified, and naturally, sales skyrocketed. The controversy reached its peak during a now infamous performance later that year. During a nationally televised concert, Rock and Rory appeared wearing oversized Tarzan-style loincloths while performing Brain Freeze. And attached to the front of those loincloths were blow-up dolls. Large female blow-up dolls. The simulation of oral copulations on the broadcast generated thousands of complaints. One newspaper described the performance as an event that somehow managed to offend everyone at the same time. Rock later argued that people were overreacting. Rory agreed, then added, they wasn't even the expensive dolls, which somehow made the situation worse. Soon, churches condemned them. Parent organizations protested them. Several venues temporarily banned them. And for the first time in their careers, Rock and Rory were being blamed for everything wrong with American youth. According to one television commentator, if civilization collapses, these two will somehow find a way to laugh at it. The irony was that neither man seemed remotely concerned. If anything, they appeared delighted by the outrage. Unfortunately, their biggest controversy was still ahead of them, and unlike the others, nobody would be laughing when it was over. By 1981, Rock and Rory had reached the absolute peak of their popularity. Brain Freeze remained a major hit. Their tours sold out, their merchandise was everywhere, and every new performance seemed determined to outdo the previous one. The problem was that nobody, not even the band themselves, appeared to know where the line was anymore. The concerts became increasingly elaborate. Soon, the stage shows featured giant jungle temples, mechanical animals, artificial waterfalls, swinging vines, smoke cannons, exploding trees, and eventually volcanoes, large volcanoes. According to several former crew members, the volcanoes were originally intended to be harmless visual effects, but harmless had never been particularly interesting to Rock and Rory. As one stage technician later recalled, if something could be bigger, they wanted it bigger. If something could explode, they wanted two of them. The volcanoes quickly became one of the band's signature attractions. Near the end of each concert, the artificial mountains would erupt dramatically while the group performed one of their closing songs. Fans loved it. Rock loved it. Rory loved it. And unfortunately, that was part of the problem, because by this point, neither man viewed the stage show as something to perform. They viewed it as something to improve constantly. Several former employees later claimed that Rock and Rory frequently altered props themselves without informing production staff. Adding things, removing things, changing things, testing things, usually because they thought it would be funny. Most of the time, nothing happened. Then came July 18th, 1981, a sold-out concert in St. Louis. More than 20,000 people packed into the venue. By all accounts, the evening began normally. The crowd was energetic. The band was energetic. Rock and Rory spent much of the show behaving exactly as they always had. Making jokes, harassing each other, improvising nonsense between songs. At one point, they reportedly spent nearly 4 minutes arguing over who had stolen whose sandwich. Nobody in the audience seemed particularly concerned. It was just Rock and Rory being Rock and Rory. Then came the volcano segment. According to multiple crew members, Rock had spent part of the afternoon experimenting with one of the effects. His goal was simple. He wanted the volcano to erupt bright red liquid, something more dramatic, something more exciting, something the audience would remember. Several witnesses later claimed Rory was aware of the idea. Others insisted he wasn't. That disagreement would become important later. What everyone agreed on was what happened next. As the final portion of the performance began, Rory approached the volcano as part of the act and stood directly above it in a victory stance. The crowd cheered, the music swelled, the effect triggered, and something went catastrophically wrong. Instead of releasing the liquid as intended, pressure rapidly built inside the structure. Then the volcano ruptured. The explosion occurred in full view of the audience, sending Rory plummeting to the ground. For several seconds, many people believed it was part of the show. They applauded, they cheered, some even laughed. Then they realized Rory wasn't getting up. The music stopped. The crowd fell silent. And for the first time in their careers, Rock and Rory weren't joking anymore. Emergency personnel rushed the stage, and what they saw stunned them beyond belief. What they saw made them sick to their stomachs. Rory's head was completely splattered and disintegrated from the explosion. The shocked audience began screaming and running. The concert ended immediately. News coverage began within hours. By morning, every major television network in America was discussing the horrific incident, and before investigators had even completed their preliminary reports, the rumors started. Some people called it a tragic accident, others called it criminal negligence, and a few believed something far darker. Because almost immediately, old stories resurfaced. Stories about arguments, creative disputes, jealousy, and Rory's position as the band's primary vocalist. Soon, tabloid headlines began asking questions nobody had considered before. Did Rock resent Rory? Was the prank really an accident, or had America's most immature rock star finally taken a joke too far? For the first time in his life, Rock wasn't laughing, and for the first time in nearly 30 years, he was completely alone. The weeks following Rory's death became some of the most chaotic in music industry history. Television coverage was relentless. Newspapers covered the story daily. Radio stations debated it constantly. And for the first time since becoming famous, Rock and Rory were no longer being discussed as entertainers. They were being discussed as evidence. Investigators spent months examining stage blueprints, engineering reports, witness testimony, and production records, attempting to determine exactly what had happened inside the volcano. The findings were devastating. According to investigators, the eruption effect had been modified shortly before the performance. The modifications were not approved. The modifications were not tested, and the modifications were reportedly made by Rock himself. Authorities ultimately concluded that Rory's death was the result of a catastrophic accident caused by reckless alterations to the stage equipment. No criminal charges were filed. Legally, the matter was settled. Publicly, it was just beginning because many people refused to believe the official explanation. Almost immediately, conspiracy theories emerged. Fans began revisiting old interviews, old performances, old magazine articles, old backstage footage, looking for proof that Rock had secretly hated Rory, proof that the friendship had been fake, proof that jealousy had finally boiled over. One tabloid headline famously asked, "Did Rock have a reason?" Another asked, "Was the volcano really for Rory?" Neither publication offered evidence. That did not stop millions of people from reading them. The rumors intensified when several former associates described the pair's relationship as competitive. Critics interpreted that as motive. Friends interpreted it as nonsense. One former road manager stated they competed over everything. Who could eat more? Who could run faster? Who could tell the dumbest joke? They were children in grown men's bodies, but they loved each other. Rock himself rarely spoke publicly. When he finally did, the interview lasted less than 5 minutes. At one point, the interviewer directly asked whether he felt responsible for Rory's death. Rock stared at the floor for several seconds before answering. Every day. The interview ended shortly afterward. Many fans expected Rock and Rory to continue. Record executives certainly did. The band generated too much money to disappear. Thunderfunk Records reportedly encouraged Rock to recruit a replacement. Tour managers proposed tribute concerts. Promoters suggested reunion-style performances using guest singers. Rock rejected all of it. Every idea, every offer, every attempt. Because, according to those closest to him, Rock could no longer write. He didn't even have the desire to pick up his beloved guitar anymore. For years, Rock had supplied much of the band's musical ideas, while Rory transformed those ideas into songs with his powerful vocals. Without Rory, the process simply stopped. The jokes stopped too, the pranks disappeared, the chaos disappeared. For the first time in his life, Rock grew up. Unfortunately, it happened all at once. For nearly a decade after Rory's death, Rock disappeared, not from the spotlight, from life. Friends described him as unrecognizable. The man who once spent entire afternoons attaching fake snakes to hotel staff members now rarely left his house. Former bandmates claimed he stopped answering phone calls, stopped attending industry events, stopped listening to music. One friend later stated, "It was like watching somebody survive a plane crash. He was alive, but the person we knew wasn't." Throughout the 1980s, occasional rumors surfaced that Rock was preparing a comeback. Every rumor proved false. No album appeared, no tour appeared, no interviews appeared, nothing. Then, in 1991, Rock unexpectedly resurfaced. And somehow, the situation became even stranger because he wasn't returning to music. He was entering the adult film industry. The announcement stunned fans, journalists, former colleagues, virtually everyone. One newspaper simply ran the headline, "Rock does what now?" At first, many assumed it was a joke. It wasn't. Within a few years, Rock had become a successful director and producer of adult films. And according to people who worked with him, he approached the job with the same obsessive creativity he once brought to stage shows. The difference was that nobody was being launched out of volcanoes. They were having volcanoes, launched in their eyes. But that's besides the point. Anyway, management reportedly appreciated the lack of practical jokes and being able to work in peace. The public reaction was mixed. Some fans were horrified, others were confused. A surprising number simply shrugged and said, "Honestly, that sounds about right." But what fascinated journalists most wasn't the career change, it was the names, because almost every company Rock created contained some variation of Rory's name. Rory Productions, Rory Entertainment, R&R Studios, Jackson Rollins Media. Adult movies named Debbie Does Rory, and Rory Does Everybody. The references never stopped, even decades later. One interviewer eventually asked, why? Why constantly bring up Rory's name? Rock looked genuinely confused by the question. Because he was my best friend. The room reportedly went silent. By the early 2000s, public opinion surrounding Rory's death had softened considerably. Most people accepted the official findings. Most, not all. Conspiracy theories never fully disappeared. Internet forums continued debating, was it truly an accident? Was Rock reckless? Did jealousy play a role? Or was it simply the inevitable outcome of two men who had spent their entire lives refusing to take anything seriously? Rock himself never seemed interested in defending his reputation. Perhaps because no explanation could change the outcome. Rory was still gone. In 2016, during a rare interview, Rock was asked what he regretted most. Many expected him to mention the volcano, the modifications, the concert, the accident. Instead, he said, "I wish we'd made one more album." A long pause followed. Then he smiled. For the first time in the interview, a genuine smile, and added, "Rory would have hated that answer." The interviewer asked why. Rock laughed softly because apparently some things never changed. He would have said we needed at least 3 more. Then he'd tell me not to worry. The interviewer asked why. Rock smiled even harder, saying, because, according to him, getting killed by a volcano was the most Rock and Rory ending possible, and he'd have it no other way. The interviewer was mortified, but Rock continued to smile in his reflection. Today, Rock lives quietly in Arizona, far from the arenas, far from the headlines, far from the volcano. But the debate surrounding Rock and Rory continues. Were they pioneers, idiots, victims of their own success, or simply 2 friends who spent so much time trying to make each other laugh that eventually one joke went too far? We'll never truly know.
Best friends who couldn't stop the pranks and just grow up. Imagine surviving all the scandals of the 1970s only to be killed by arts and crafts. Truly disturbing times indeed. So, viewers at home, that's y'all's fan base name. Do you think Rock did this on purpose? Or was it truly a mistake from a prank gone wrong? Send in your thoughts. I'm going to leave you now with the song that started it all. Thank you and good night.
Rockin' Rory. Ow! Somebody help that woman. Lord have mercy. Yeah. Friday night, 9:45. She said, "Baby, let me in." Candles low and Marvin on. Everything was moving strong. She was smiling ear to ear. Said, "Relax, got nothing to fear." One little move, one little squeeze. That's when trouble was coming to me. This woman was giving it up all in love. I swear she was trying to make me fall. Oh, baby, I could see she was only aiming to please.